Hello everyone, I'm Sylvia from Fairlight Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you all of my indie tarot decks. I don't even know how many I've got, and it's probably a bit of a denial that it's playing in the background here. And speaking about background, I apologize in advance for the kind of a hissing noise that you can hear every now and then. It is cicadas. So I live in the eastern coast of Australia, where close to the sea, and when it's a sunny day like today, we have massive, really massive cicadas. You know, being happy that it's sunny, and they want to tell the world, and they are extremely noisy. And even though everything is closed, every window and door is closed, there's nothing I can do about it. So I'll try and do some noise reduction in post-production, but there'll still be something in the background, so my apologies for that. This is the first part of a collection series. I've done already the oracle ones. They're up in my channel, and I will link them at the end of this video, but I hadn't done a tarot collection video yet. Because to be honest with you, the task looked a bit daunting to me. On the one hand, I really didn't want to know how many I have, because it feels like you have to take responsibility for it. I'm being completely honest with you right now, full disclosure. But it's also because I didn't want to do a really long video, and I thought, okay, I need to divide them up, but I didn't know how on my tarot decks. And I thought, well, you know what, the easiest thing is probably by indie production and mass market production. So this is the first part, and it's about the indie production. There is no particular order to what I'm showing you, and also I'll probably have to film this video in 2 or 3 different days, so you might see different backgrounds, different nail polish color. This one is by far my most precious tarot deck, and it's the Brimstone and Earthflesh Tarot by Avalon Cameron, which is from Tasmania, and I live in Australia, so we're co-nationals. And the artwork though is by Torian, who is by far my favorite illustrator ever. So this tarot deck, there's been so many rumors about this deck. Is it going to be reprinted? It's difficult to know. I saw in Avalon's website that she was selling the last, let's say, copies of the first print run, saying that after that there wouldn't have been any more print runs of the indie edition. If it's going to be picked up mass market, the common consensus is that the booklet or the guidebook actually is going to be much smaller. As you can see, it is a really big book. This tarot is so hard to find, so difficult to get a hold of, and it's so expensive. The colors are simply amazing. As you can see, very vibrant, very beautiful. The artwork is fantastic. It's Anna's typical artwork. If you have the Oracle of Echoes or the Tarot of the Abyss, that's her work. And she's also done the Tarot of the Hidden Waters. She's also illustrated a Lenormand. I think it's called Claire de la Lune. And she's working right now on the Tarot of Echoes. This deck is I found that even though I haven't been reading too much with it, because I'm simply too scared of ruining it, and that's unfortunately I find whenever I spend so much on a deck, I kind of feel reluctant to use it, because I'm really scared about ruining it. But this deck is amazing. Even by just looking at it, it's therapeutic, I feel. It makes you feel better, or maybe just because, you are one of the lucky ones to have it. And the cardstock is phenomenal. Really, really beautiful matte. It's a sturdy card as well. There is diversity in this deck, which I really appreciate. And I have a print, a sketch, sorry, by Anna, of the Chariot, which is coincidentally the card of the year for 2023, for this year. So I'm quite happy that I got a hold of that. So this is the Burnstone and Earth Flash Tarot by Avalon Cameron, illustrated by Anna Torian. The next deck is the Oriens Tarot Afterlight edition. Now this deck is absolutely gorgeous, and I have to say that I'm very happy with the whole story, which I acquired it. The creator Jessica, I reached out to her because the shipping costs were almost as high as the deck itself. So I was very hesitant, but I really wanted this particular edition because it's got, as you can see, cream colored borders as opposed to different borders for each suit. And I just wanted this one. I had this feeling that it was a completely different vibe. It felt like a completely different deck from the other editions. So I reached out to her and I said, look, I'm in Australia, and I see that, you know, the shipping costs were something like $90. And she was fantastic. She answered all my messages straight away, and you know, she gave me a hand. So big shout out to her, because you can tell when a creator really care about their product, and they just want other people to enjoy it as it should be. So this deck is beautiful. I really appreciate the earthy vibe of the whole deck. I really appreciate the way it reads. It's a straight shooter. It's an animal deck, as you can see, but it's more like a nature kind of deck. It's not necessarily centered on animals. As you can see, not all cards have got animals. For example, this one doesn't. The guidebook that came with it is absolutely fantastic. It's got a lot of insight, not just an explanation of the deck itself and the cards. It really brings you back to a connection, a more meaningful connection to the earth. Seven of Pentacles, so beautiful. And the Hermit card is one of my favorite ones. So this is the Oriens Tarot. This is the Afterlight edition. And here we've got the Star Power Tarot, which is by Zigzag Girl. That's her handle on Instagram. I've been following her on Instagram for a while. Well, there you go. Tyldwick Tarot at zigzaggirl.com. Always reach for the stars. I absolutely adore this deck. So much so, look at the gilding. Just can I spare a word for the gilding? This is a silver gilding, as you can see. It is not, it's a way between a glossy kind of gilding and a matte one. It's still glossy though, because it does catch the light, as you can see, but it's perfectly done. It's really high quality. It doesn't hurt your finger when you shuffle. And last but not least, as a matter of fact, probably the most important feature, it does not chip. I wish that all the indie deck productions were made with this quality, really high quality gilding. I find this deck to be absolutely gorgeous. The artwork is very busy, as you can see. I love the fact that, yes, it does have this dotted line as borders, but the artwork goes beyond that, so I don't really mind. To me, these are not necessarily borders. It's just not a shy deck. It's a deck that really confronts you, and but in a good way, in a positive way. It's a very modern kind of style, a kind of deck that, you know, it feels like it stands on its own. As a matter of fact, I don't have a lot of oracle decks that I could pair up with this tarot. Sometimes I literally buy a deck because it could pair well with another deck that I've got. This one, I use it on its own. But this deck is so gorgeous, and by the way, the cardstock is phenomenal, even though, yes, it is glossy, and yes, it does catch the light, which is not my favorite, but this one I actually don't mind. I think that the fact that it's glossy actually gives the colors a lot more vibrancy. It's just every single card, look at this Six of Swords, every single card makes you think, it makes you look at all the details. The swords are here, there is still the element of water, there is still this sort of sense of having to move on, even though it's so hard and it's so painful. But the journey we've embarked upon is a necessary one, and we know that we're going towards a better place. It's just that it takes so much out of us right now to do that. I really appreciate the way some cards are represented here. But look at this Four of Pentacles, is just absolutely gorgeous to me. There's this sense of keeping everything within our own grasp. It's got an edgy feel to it. This is generally the deck that I take with me when I'm traveling. I don't know why, it's just, it just is. This is the Star Power Tarot by Zigzag Girl. The next deck is a very famous one, it's the Gentle Tarot by Mary in the Sky. This deck, as the name says, it's a very gentle tarot. It's a hug deck. It's one of my go-to decks when I feel a bit down and I really want to reconnect to that part of myself that feels good, that feels okay. I love that the gilding is, as you can see, it's gold, but it's a matte kind of gold. This is probably, if I had to choose, my favorite type of gilding. The cardstock is really good. It's the kind of matte that I like. There's also a linen version, just for you to know. It is a bit of a peepish deck, but it's really evocative, let's say. I really like the use of the color palette, but what I like most is the way in which this deck delivers a message to you without hurting you. So it still tells you the truth. It's not about avoiding the truth. It's not about camouflaging it. If it's a difficult situation, you want to make it better. And this deck kind of helps you doing that. So it's a deck that is actually very present in my personal self-care practice. I do use it whenever I feel down, but also whenever I feel like I don't have a lot of energy. I just feel like I'm safe whenever I read with this deck. There are decks that don't necessarily make me feel safe. I still use them anyway, because you don't always have to feel safe. Sometimes you have to put yourself, you know, out of the comfort zone, but not always. Sometimes we actually need to recharge our batteries, and this is the deck that I would use to do that. And this Strength card is probably one of my favorite ones, because I live close to the ocean, and in Australia we do get the it's the typical route of the migration of the not specifically this one, but it does look as southern right whale. So we do have the migration of the southern right whales from about, I'd say, end of May till November, depending on the temperatures. And sometimes another whale, and sometimes I go for a walk, literally about a K from where I live, and from the promenade between one beach and the other, I can actually look out and see the whales. They come out, you know, in the ocean, and you can definitely see them when they breach, which is probably whenever I doubt myself about living where I live, I remind myself of how lucky I am to be able to see these kind of things. So this is the Gentle Tarot by Mary in the Sky. The next deck is the Savvy Soul Tarot by Julie Whitelish. This deck is becoming very famous now. It was an original Kickstarter that I backed last year. I think it was in more or less April. And I received it back in November. And I haven't seen it a lot in let's say, in social media. But whenever I show it, I do get requests for a link where this deck can be purchased. As of the 20th of January, I spoke to Julie, and as of the 20th of January, she still had something like 25 copies in stock. Now, she does say in her website, and I'll put the link in the description box below, she does say that she does only US domestic shipping. However, it does say on her Instagram page that if you're overseas from the US, then you can message her and she will look at possibilities. So you might be able to still get it. This deck is incredible. It's becoming really quickly one of my favorites. And the reason mainly, well, there's a few reasons, but mainly is because of its modern take of the RWS. But it's the kind of deck that I recognize myself with. It's as if it were a deck that looks at my life, points out at the various stages of the hero's journey through the major arcanas, and it shows it back to me, and then it goes through all of the suits, still again with memories from my own life, and it shows them back to me. But this is definitely me. It's I cannot always recognize myself in all of the 78 cards, in the sense that I do not have an actual memory for all of them, but I have been certainly, every time I see a card, it does remind me of something. It does resonate with me, and it strikes a chord in my heart, and it's just the kind of deck that I really enjoy using, and it's like hearing my own voice speaking to me. I really love the interpretation of particularly all of the cards. Like, for example, the Seven of Swords is a hacker, you know, stealing your data, which is, it's so modern, but at the same time it's so traditional RWS, if you know what I mean. I really enjoy using it. It's just that kind of deck that you have once in, I don't know, once every now and then you come across something like this, and I consider myself incredibly lucky to have come across this deck. One very important thing about the characters in these cards, they are grayed out, because Julie says that she wants us to fill them in. She wants to start from a clean slate, and she wants us to fill them in with color, with our own experiences, which I think it's a very cool concept. See, I perfectly understand this King of Swords. It's like, it's the perfect example for me of the archetype of the King of Swords. The King of Swords is the scientist. And, you know, it's a scientist looking into the mind. How perfect is that? This deck is, I'll tell you what, I believe that it's, even though it's not an RWS clone, and I know that everyone recommends RWS decks for beginners, I think that this deck, it would be an excellent reader for beginners as well. But it can be enjoyed by experienced readers too. So this devil card with the Wi-Fi symbol, I just really love it. It's I cannot stop myself from looking at these cards and using them too. It's not just a beautiful deck that you're satisfied with looking at it. I actually really feel like I will always want to use it too. And by the way, this is my favorite Ace of Swords. It's just fantastic. So this was the Savvy Soul Tarot by Julie Whitelish. This deck is the Illuminations Tarot by Carrie Kurstad. It's a recent acquisition. I was quite happy because I ordered it from the US, and I was bracing myself for having to wait a couple of months for it to arrive. These are the backs, by the way. I'm not sure that I've been showing the backs of the other ones, but this is a really nice one. It's reversible if that's your thing. It's gilded, again, not my favorite, but again, it looks like it's a good one. It's a good gilding, good quality. And so I was bracing myself to wait for a long time, and instead, after a couple of weeks, it was already here. So, you know, whenever that happens, instead of, usually we have really bad experiences in Australia when it comes to shipping from overseas and also domestic, don't get me started. Whenever, every now and then, we have good stories about shipping, we're always very happy. So this deck is a collage kind of deck, and it does retain that kind of vintage feel to it, but also still with a bit of a modern kind of cards every here and there. The choice on the of the characters, as you can see here, for example, this is the skyline of Shanghai. I really like it. I saw it, I originally bought it because, or I originally looked at it online because I needed something to pair well with the Oracle of the Divine Muses. So full disclaimer, sometimes I am like that. I have an Oracle or a Tarot deck and I want to use them. I want to find another deck that pairs up well with them, and therefore that's one, let's say, one of the reasons why I purchased a deck. This one was totally like that. I was a purchase because I was looking for something that went well with the Oracle of the Divine Muses, and that's what I did. When I saw it, I bought it. If I quickly have a look at the guidebook, in the guidebook you also see the Tree of Life, so it's got a bit of a Kabbalah information in there as well. This is the guidebook, which is actually really complete, I'd say. So you've got the Sephira, the Deacon, the Element, which is incredibly interesting if you're studying, for example, Kabbalah. So it's very nice because it's got a small thumbprint of in color of the card, and you know, then the description, light, shadow meaning, and card meaning. So this is the Muse Tarot by Kerry Krogstad. The next deck is the Inkwitch Tarot by Eric Mell. I absolutely like Eric's work. In this deck in particular, it's one of my favorites, is probably one of my most used decks. And this is also, together with the Star Power, a deck that I take with me whenever I'm traveling, because I found that I have a lot of friends that really appreciate it, not just myself, but also you know, whenever I'm giving a reading. It is a very modern take on the RWS. The strength, for example, is about showing courage, but you can see the lemniscate above the head of the person here. It is absolutely beautiful. I have been following Eric's Instagram page for a while, and sometimes it just shows his creative process whenever he's you know, coming up with a different deck. For example, I followed up close when he was showing the cards of the Endless Oracle, and it is just fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I love the fact that it's a very coherent color scheme throughout the whole deck. I really appreciate that. It's a muted kind of color palette. The line work is definitely very interesting. You know, with stronger traits and less strong ones. For example, here it depends on the thickness of the point. And I don't know, I feel like whenever I use this deck, I'm invited to have a conversation with it. I feel like I'm almost coming back home, which is something that you definitely want. You want to feel at ease when you're reading a deck, and this deck definitely does that for me. It does tend to be, some cards tend to be pippish, as you can see, but I feel like it still gives you the sense, the essence of the card. For example, the Eight of Cups, you have this person leaving something that is broken behind. Such a beautiful deck. I never stop admiring it, just going through it. It's just really, really beautiful. So this is the Oriens Tarot by Eric Mayo. This deck is adorable. It's the tarot bought by Michael Murdoch. It's absolutely adorable. I have it by complete chance. I was browsing one of the Facebook groups where you can sell, buy or swap your tarot decks, and I just saw this. I googled it. It was a really reasonable price. I saw that it was, I think it was out of print, or at least this edition. There's a different edition as well, and I knew I had to have it. It's just so quirky. By the way, the backs are, this is a very glossy deck. The backs have this gold foil, which I actually really like. And this gilding is not necessarily one of my favorite, but I did use this deck a lot, and as you can see, it's kept up pretty good. It's set in a dystopian kind of futuristic world in which every human has been replaced by a robot, as you can tell, and also animals have been replaced by robots. And it's just, you know, it does its own thing. It's very easy to read. It's a very WS inspired tarot deck, but it's just amazing. I really love the interpretation of the cards. There's a few additional arcanas, as you can see, which is very interesting. When they come up in a reading, there's not necessarily a lot of description of these additional arcanas in the, there's a very small guidebook, more like a booklet. So it does read intuitively for those additional cards. The colors are just so incredibly beautiful. The burnt oranges and the red and the yellows, it's just some of my favorite combination. And I just, you know, it cheers me up. It's a deck that, to me, it's a good mood kind of deck. It's, even though, as I said, it reads really well as a RWS inspired deck. As you can see, the usual Three of Swords with a pierced heart, which is not necessarily how I read it. I do read numerologically. I find that it's incredibly, let's say, more to the point, but, you know, this is just me, so. But whether you read numerologically or not, I think that when a deck is speaking to you, that's the most important thing. And this deck definitely speaks to me. We have a really funny conversation. It just cheers me up. It's an incredibly, I believe even the artwork is just really beautiful. So this is the Tarot Bot by Michael Murdoch. The next tarot is quite famous. It's the Bohemian Gothic by Baba Studio. In particular, the creators are Alex Uklov and Karen Mahoney. This deck is so cheeky. I think there's no other word that you can use with this deck. It is incredibly beautiful. The artwork is fantastic. It is very evocative. This world card is very popular. It's probably one of the most appreciated world card in the tarot community, but I love these Three of Wands. I have a thing for you know, churches, ruins of churches like that. In specific, I believe that this one is modeled after, I think it's St. Andrews on the coastline of northern Scotland. But if you know better, please let me know. I just have a thing for this kind of landscape, and I don't know why. Now, this is a kind of a horror kind of deck. As you can see, we've got Frankenstein here as well. And there's vampires in this deck too. There's ghosts, as you can see. So it's the kind of deck, there's, you know, skeletons walking about. It's the kind of deck that I definitely enjoy using in and around Halloween. but it's, I don't know, I don't mind using it throughout the rest of the year as well. And it reads really well. I have yet to find an oracle deck that will pair well with it, or at least that will make me feel like it's a good match. It's a perfect match, I'd say. But it doesn't matter even if I use it on its own. I mean, look at this 7 of Wands, it's just fantastic. So this is the Bohemian Gothic Tarot by Baba Studio. The next deck is the Oriens Tarot, and this is the 2nd edition. When I saw the 1st edition, I wanted to get it, but I was a bit put off by the borders. The borders that look a little bit like lace, black lace around the cards. I couldn't really get on board with that. But when I heard it was a Kickstarter campaign to produce a 2nd version of this borderless full bleed like this, I was on board. It's just an incredibly beautiful artwork for me. The colors are amazing. It's got a soft kind of edge to it as well. It's the kind of rose petal finish, but I find that the more I use it, the better it gets. I love that it's an animal deck. It's a nature/animal deck. It's, in this sense, it feels like it's a hug deck. But it's definitely that kind of, look at this box, it's amazing. I love the fact that, you know, they chose the traditional symbol for when you refer to an animal deck. Traditionally, the foxes are the suit of wands because of the fiery energy. Foxes are shapeshifters and magic animals. And I love this 8 of Wands with the umbrellas and the butterflies. I have a lot of animal decks, and this, by the way, this card, I've heard a lot of people saying that they were put off by this card because it's a large, quite a large spider. I live in Australia, so even though I was arachnophobic, so I had this phobia for spiders before moving here, but ever since I moved here, I had to get over it. And I'm not saying that you remove yourself from a phobia by getting over it. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But I am constantly, daily surrounded by spiders that are as big as my hand, that I'm not even kidding. They're called huntsman spiders. They are innocuous, they don't bite, or if they do, they're not venomous. But I can assure you that I could die because of a heart attack, because you don't necessarily go about your house, you know, going inside the room at night and switching on the light and thinking that you're going to be faced with a brownish, dark brownish, hairy spider as big as your hand, you know, on the door. You don't plan for that, you know what I mean? But since it happens in certain times of the year, I kid you not, it happens at least once every 3-4 days. So I have learned how to survive. I am coping with it, and I love that I'm finishing with this 5 of Pentacles. It's just a beautiful fox and a rabbit sitting on top. Now this is the Oriens Tarot. This is by Bouchet Design, and it's the 2nd edition. This deck is the Dark Mansion Tarot. I think it's well known by everyone. I love the fact that it's got some gold foil on the box. This deck is, let's say, a bit of a hit and miss for me, because it's that kind of rose petal cardstock that is, it really sticks, and it's quite difficult to fan out. It's difficult to hover and shuffle. However, I don't necessarily let that bother me. I know that this cardstock, the more you use it, the better it is, the better it gets. It gets a bit smoother with the use. And you know, when I look at the artwork, I just think this deck is simply fantastic. I mean, look at the details in the cards. It's just amazing. It is an incredibly busy deck. These stick figures, you know, they remind me a bit of a maybe a Tim Burton's production. It is very RWS, but it's just delicious. I use the term delicious in the sense that it just gives you that idea that it's just incredibly good. Look at the Judgment card. This is definitely Tim Burton's feel to it. It's just one of those decks that, you know, it does, if you look at the Three of Wands, for example, it is a straight shooter. The meaning of the card is right there. You are leading, you are putting your wheels into motion, you have been planning in the Two of Wands before, you're done with the planning, now you want to get out and do stuff. Or, you know, the sort of a competition on the Five of Wands, the speed and the news in the Eight of Wands. It's you know, it's the kind of deck that it's kind of whimsical. The figures are all a bit funny to look at, but it is a straight shooter, and I do use it like most people. I know I use it during the darker months, or because we live in Australia. Obviously for us the darker months are during July and August, which are the brighter months in the northern hemisphere. Sometimes I use it, therefore I use it in July, in August, but I also use it around Halloween, because it does have that kind of vibe, that kind of feel to it. I just really love it. It's by Tarot Studio, by the way. Now the thing with Tarot Studio is that if you buy directly from them, I don't know whether it's still the case, but I think it still was when I bought the Slavic Legend. The shipping is like, I don't know, $10. And it comes from Poland. And it took a while to be delivered. I think it took something like 6 weeks to come to Australia. But I was like, well, for $10, I don't mind. Fair enough. You know, it's actually cheaper than domestic shipping here. So this is, and these are the backs. There's different versions of the backs. So this was the Dark Mansion Tarot by Tarot Studio. And also by Tarot Studio, the Slavic Legends Tarot. This is relatively new. I think I pre-ordered it a few months ago, but I only received it I think it was November, if I'm not wrong. Also different versions of this deck. The one I got, because I really didn't like the rose petal cardstock of the Dark Mansion, there was an option to choose it for this deck as well, but I went with the semi-gloss, or rather glossy kind of finish. I am so happy that I chose to do that, because I feel like I can use it a lot more. It's just a pleasure to use this deck because of that. The cards are amazing. The artwork, I think this is my favorite Three of Swords of all times, and I know that I keep on saying that because I read numerologically, the Three of Swords is technically the overthinking for me. However, these are true black swans, and how cool is that? I absolutely like it. I adore it. Now there's a lot of talk about this deck because it's based, as the title says, on Slavic legends, but it does not come with a guidebook. Therefore, unless you are an expert on Slavic legends, which I'm not, and I would love to be, if I have time, I'll definitely read about it, but if I knew at least the name on the cards, if they represent a typical legend, I would love to know, you know, what is the legend called, and then I can look it up. But the only thing that I can tell is that this is Baba Yaga, because that's the typical way in which she moves, let's say, but I don't know much else. And it's an absolutely gorgeous deck. This one, as well as the Dark Mansion, has got such a care for details It's unbelievable. I don't know how many hours they spent. I mean, if you look at this card, look at the details of the line work, not just on the caps, but on the foliage here, and the lines behind here, and the lines of the water, the small rivers. It's just amazing. Or this card, the Empress. There's just so much to look at. I love this Temperance card. It reminds me of the Expecto Patronum spell in Harry Potter when he needs to defend himself from the Dementors. I don't know if anyone got the same feel to it. It's an incredibly beautiful deck. Some cards are literally just a work of art for me. I always consider decks as a work of art because the creators are artists. But I don't always like all of them. But in this deck, for example, there is not one single card that I don't like. All of it is just incredibly beautiful. The Phoenix. So this is the Slavic Legends Tarot by Taroteka Studio. This is also a recent acquisition of mine. This is the Monsoon Tarot, and it's the deluxe edition. This tarot deck, I've featured it in a couple of videos on my channel already. So after much debating, we've come to the conclusion, thanks to the help of some of you, that this is inspired by Japanese fairy tales, but it's not necessarily based on known Japanese fairy tales. Because I was saying that it's a pity that the guidebook doesn't specify the meaning, the actual description, let's say, of the cards, and it doesn't tell me the reason for the choice of these particular scenes, for example, you know, for each and every card, which I would have really loved. And even though it's not based, I understand that it's not based on a specific fairy tales, it's more like the art style that is based on that. It would have been really cool. Imagine if you know, you would look at this image, there's origami on the water here, for example, on a line of water, and you know, it would have been really cool to read if there had been a story behind it, or it would have been equally cool to read the choice of the author or the choice of the illustrator. Why did they choose to depict that particular card in that particular way? But in any case, I really love it. It's a really nice color palette. It's got incredibly beautiful images in the cards. It reads really well, even though it's not necessarily an RWS. But you can get to the meaning of the cards if you take your time and you look at them. The guidebook will tell you the traditional meaning of the cards. And it's just, it's a very dreamy kind of deck, as you can tell. So this is the Monsoon Tarot, and it's the deluxe edition. The next deck is the Curious Travels Tarot deck by Oriens. I'm so grateful to have this deck because I got it from Sharon from Trio of Witches Tarot, and it's just, I was looking for this deck for a long time. It is the indie edition, but I know that it has been picked up by US Games, although there still isn't a publication date yet. This one, obviously, I didn't have it back then because I only acquired it probably a couple of months ago, but it would have been one of the decks that I would have used back then. So this is the Curious Travels Tarot deck by Oriens. The next deck has got a very good story. It's the Saki Tarot. Now the Monica Cleosaki has come up with a new version of this tarot, which is, I think, still in pre-order, or if it's not in pre-order anymore, it will be available from, I guess, mid-February. But I do recommend you check out her website, and I will put down the link in the description box below, just for you to have a look at how you can grab a copy of it. It's got a really good story because these are the backs, by the way. It's got a really good story because I wanted this deck so much, but it used to sell for stupid prices, $300-400, which I couldn't afford, obviously, and but I really wanted it. And so I found a really nice lady from Canada that had a copy, and she said, look, let's do it this way, I will swap you. But she only wanted mass market decks, so I ended up getting her something like 5 or 6 mass market decks that I had. And I said, are you sure? Because the value obviously was not adding up to how much she could have made by selling it. And she was like, no, she said, I'm quite happy with it because, you know, I had to fork out the expenses for the shipping as well. But when I finally received it after maybe a couple of months, I was so happy. I really loved it. It is kind of whimsical. I know that the new version, there you go. The new version, for example, has got heads. So it is kind of different, but I really enjoyed. I enjoyed looking at it. I enjoyed reading with it. It's it really has its own personality, and even though it is based still on the RWS system, but I really like it. I like the colors, I like the line work, I like everything about this deck. So this is the first edition of the Saki Tarot by Monica Cleosaki. And here we've got another quite famous deck. It's the Oak, Ash and Thorn deck by Stephanie Burrows and Adam Ollers. Sorry if I mispronounce it. This deck is absolutely gorgeous. It's another animal deck. I think you probably see how much I appreciate and I like animal decks. These are the backs, by the way, really beautiful. This deck is printed on one of my favorite cardstock. Is quite thick and sturdy. It's a matte one, but very smooth. But it still retains the vibrancy of the colors on the cards, even though the choice of the creators for the color palettes are very, let's say, consistent throughout the suits. It is an incredibly beautiful deck. I really like, for example, this is one of the decks that I really enjoy using with certain specific oracle decks, like for example the Wooden Wardens, but also the Roots and Wings, for example. Or sometimes I use a botanical deck, like for example the Herbal Astrology Oracle goes really well with this deck too. It's an animal deck, but it's not necessarily a hug deck. There are animal decks that are gentle. This one, it's not that it's not gentle, but it does not pull punches. It's just really a straight shooter, let's say. I don't necessarily feel like it's a hug deck, even though it's not a confronting deck, let's put it this way, but it's a deck that helps you get the message, kind of like the Gentle Tarot, in such a way that it doesn't hurt you, but it's still telling you, revealing the truth. So this is the Oak, Ash and Thorn Tarot by Stephanie Burrows and Adam Ollers. This is the Spirit Speak Tarot and I'm not entirely sure, but so this is a like a bridge size edition. I think there might be a bigger edition, but don't quote me on that, I'm not entirely sure. And it has been created by Mary Elizabeth Evans in Oakland, California in 2014. I really enjoy this deck, first of all because of its size, because I do have small hands, and which means that you know, whenever a deck is smaller than the standard tarot size, it is easier for me to use. I don't always like black and white decks, but it's not necessarily a deal breaker for me. I love, by the way, the backs with the roses like that. This deck is all about symbols, and I really like it. I really like reading with it. You see, in this case, for example, because it does have such a straight symbology, I don't mind that it's black and white. Another black and white that I don't mind is, for example, that I don't mind that it's black and white, so I still appreciate it, is the Tarot of the Abyss by Oriens, because the artwork is so incredibly beautiful and there's so much detail. This is quite the opposite. I actually like that it's in black and white because there's a lot of contrast in the scenes depicted. But as I said, I really do appreciate the symbology, and you know, it's it goes well with the name Spirit Speak. It's literally a kind of way to communicate with your spirit guide, if you have one, for example. It just establishes a kind of a conversation that lets you get into the essence of the cards, the meanings of the cards. So this is the Spirit Speak Tarot by Mary Elizabeth Evans. The next deck is the Carnival at the End of the World Tarot by Mrs. Orlovsky and Folke of the Troppy Fledermaus. Again, my apology if I don't pronounce the names correctly. Now, this tarot is incredibly quirky, and yet I find that the symbology used is very straightforward. Like, I have no problems in recognizing the cards. I have no problems in talking about the cards. You know, there's, again, on the Eight of Wands, there's that sense of receiving news, for example. And it's, you know, the Page of Swords is the one that asks why. For me, is the archetype of the detective, the ones that asks a lot of questions, and obviously is listening attentively to the answers. I feel like there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of research that went behind this deck, the production of this deck. And I really like the fact that it's so whimsical, that it's, you know, the characters, they look like, you know, they live in a very special and non-earthly kind of world. It's something that is completely different from ours, and yet it's an inviting kind of world that sometimes is a bit of a scary one. I remember talking to someone on Instagram about the background color of these cards. They look like they're all different, as you can see quite clearly. It is the original one. It's this way. There's no particular reason for it. I do really appreciate the guidebook, which is not sold together. I think you have to, I don't remember specifically, I think I bought it from a different website, for example. But it is incredibly beautiful to read the description of the cards in that guidebook, which has a feel. It feels like it's a story that has been told, and it's definitely got some very quirky cards. I can tell you, it's, I mean, you can see it for yourself from these cards. It's just really deeply odd, and yet I really like it. I really enjoy using it. I think that this Two of Wands is one of my favorite depiction for this card, because it shows you how you can be in two different minds about something, and which is the way I read the Two of Wands. And this man made of houses. The tower is just incredible. So this is the Carnival at the End of the World Tarot by Orlovsky and Folke. This deck is definitely one of my good mood decks. It's the Desert Illuminations Tarot. It's by Lindsay Williams. This deck is based on the atmosphere, the tradition, the life in New Mexico, and it does give you that kind of vibes. I love New Mexico. I have been visiting. I've done a road trip all around it. My husband and I have been going to Roswell, where in July they have the Alien Festival. So in this tarot deck you will see aliens as well, and they are just absolutely hilarious. They are beautiful. This is the Virgen de Guadalupe. You have a bit of a mix of that kind of culture, in which you have, for example, there's a card that depicts George O'Keeffe, who's a very famous painter. Well, there you go. There she is. I really love that kind of feeling of the desert. If you've never been to New Mexico, this is in some areas what you definitely feel, what you see. It is kind of, you know, chilly everywhere. There's this place in Santa Fe which sells Fritos, like a bag of Fritos, you know, the chips, and then they put so much chili on top, and it's just absolutely superb. And it was featured by one of Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown, I think, episode. This abduction of the cow is just absolutely fantastic for the Judgment card. I know that there's a second edition which is borderless by the same author, obviously, which has been recently released. I prefer this one with borders because I may be completely wrong, but I feel like in this case they are there for a reason. They contain the artwork. It is a really, really fun deck. See this, the Suit of Pentacles, it's got cacti on it, but every now and then you can definitely see a UFO, which I think is absolutely hilarious. Or, you know, this card in which you have an alien holding a cactus on top of a cow with a UFO in the sky. Or, you know, Sorrow, for example. I love the colors of this deck as well. It's just a perfect choice. I think they go really, really well. Some cards are really peepish, but that's okay. It's an RWS. So this is the Desert Illuminations Tarot, and it's by Lindsay Williams. This next deck is the Oriens Tarot deck. Now, I think by Ambition, which is our very own from Melbourne. This is the pocket size edition, indie, and this deck is quite famous because it has been picked up mass market, I think from Rockpool, if I'm not wrong. You can see it, it's got a fantastic guidebook, and you can see it in many channels, featured in many channels. I got this edition because, well, at the time I got it, this one has got an holographic kind of edging, silver, very beautiful. I love it, very high quality. Cardstock is fantastic. I got this edition and not the larger one, even when it was an indie one, because there was a card in specific. Let's see if I can find it, but you know, from Murphy's Law, whenever you look at one specific card, you never find it. But there was a slight difference in the coloring of the death card. In this edition, it looked like the colors were more vibrant, were brighter, let's say. So that was the Death card, and there was another card that had the same issue, or not issue, just simply difference between the two decks. And I think that there was a difference in the gilding. I think the larger size deck had a red gilding, which is notorious to be easily chipped. Look at these Three of Cups, I just adore it. But in any case, so this is the deck is amazing. It's an animal deck, but it's kind of a dreamlike atmosphere. The Two of Swords is beautiful. Look at the colors of this. I really like it. It's a very kind deck, like others, like other animal decks that I have in my collection. But it's still really straight. It gives you a really good reading. I love this Ten of Pentacles. I think Ambition has come out very recently, I think a couple of weeks ago, with the pre-orders for her Oracle deck. So if you like this tarot, you think you might want to check out the Oracle deck, I do recommend going to her Instagram page, where you can definitely have a look. I think it's called Ambi Studio, but I'll put the link in the description box below. So this is the Oriens Tarot deck by Ambison. The next deck is a very famous deck as well, and it's the Sassurabito Tarot by Stasia Barrington. And I really love the gold foil on the box. This tarot is quite famous. I've seen it so many times in many YouTube channels, or even Instagram or Facebook. It's got the kind of combination of colors and line work that I really like, that I really enjoy. It's a very easy reader. The only thing that it just puts me off a bit is the keyword, the titles, and the fact that there's this kind of a banner here. Like, personally, I would have preferred not to have this big of a banner, but you know, it's just like, imagine if this, well, this card is a bit sad, but let's have a look at a different card that is not as sad. All Swords, of course. There you go. Oh, little kitty cat. So imagine if this had been, you know, if you could see more of the artwork, for example, instead of having this kind of banner, which is really large, and it's absolutely nothing. It doesn't say anything about the choice of the illustrator or the author. It's just a personal opinion that has absolutely nothing to, it takes away nothing from the deck. It is still a very favorite deck of mine. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy using it. Stasia is also the author of the Anti-Cap Oracle, which you know, pairs really well with this tarot deck. So this is the Sassurabito Tarot by Stasia Barrington. The next deck I'm showing you is the very famous Serpent Fire Tarot. This is the 7th and I believe last edition. I follow the artist Instagram page, and she was mentioning that she's had, you know, 7 edition of this deck. It's quite incredible. If you ask me, it's an incredible achievement. These are the backs, and I really like them. This tarot is really beautiful. It's got that kind of a cosmic feel to it. I enjoy reading with it, even though it is quite, to me, it looks like it's quite a step away from the traditional RWS system. I absolutely don't mind. There is a lot of evocative symbols in the cards, which I really enjoy. It's the kind of artwork that it just makes me think, it makes me focus on the cards. I love the color palette. This is my favorite cardstock, so obviously it's another box that is ticked. I think there's a lot of the artist that comes out in this deck. You can really, you feel her presence everywhere. She's got a very active Instagram page, and she's very outspoken, so it's actually really nice to know her and then look at her creations and recognize her take on things. I love this full card. So this is the Serpent Fire Tarot, and it's by Divani Wolf. The next two tarots are from the same creator, the super cool Harley Spencer. So the Badass Tarot 1 Factory Edition and the Badass Tarot 2 Don't Tell Mama. Now, what I've done with these two decks that I absolutely adore, I picked my favorite cards from each and every one of them, and I created the one deck, let's say. I consolidated them. It is very easy to do that because they have, as you can see, exactly the same backing. And also the layout of the cards is very similar. It's not very similar, it's actually the same. Now, this deck is so irreverent. I absolutely adore it. It still gives you, it still follows the RWS system, so it shows you the knowledge of the artist, you know, behind the choice of the cards. For example, in this Five of Pentacles, you know, it really shows you the misery, you know, the being left out in the cold by this character that is showing you that they've got an empty wallet, don't have enough money, but they would love to buy the branded bags or whatever. So it's just each and every card is just so right on your nose, and it does it with no bullshit. You know, I am free of your bullshit. This is exactly the spirit of this deck. I adore it. As you can imagine, it's a straight shooter. It does hit all the right, it checks all the right boxes for me. You know, you have the suit of the mind in the swords, for example, so you do have that kind of overthinking. You know, there's always a way of looking at the cards and finding, on the one hand, the traditional meaning, on the other hand, on a more modern meaning, or a modern take of the traditional meaning. Look at this Fool card, for example, absolutely, you know, spot on to what could be conceived nowadays as a typical Fool card. I absolutely adore it. It's really fantastic. I enjoy using it. I use it very often. Again, it's one of those decks that I have to, you know, if I use it for a client, unless I know them, you know, we will have to talk about it, because not everyone likes this kind of really, you know, irreverent kind of deck. But if you enjoy it, then it actually gives incredibly good readings, because it's very, very straight. It's a sharpshooter, and I just really enjoy it. So this is a combination of the Badass Tarot 1 and Badass Tarot 2, and the artist is Harley Spencer. This deck is absolutely amazing. This is the Hayworth Tarot, and it's based on the Welcome to Night Vale podcast. Now, that podcast is the most quirky podcast I've ever listened to it. Sorry, I had to put at the back that strength card, because I know that it's kind of a triggering card for a lot of people. It is quite confronting. There's a few cards that are actually quite confronting in this deck, but there's a sister deck to this one, which is called the Welcome to Night Vale Tarot, which I also have, and it's not, let's say it's not as confronting. The artwork though in this tarot to me is a lot more unique, and I really enjoy it. I really like it. I like the choice of the kind of a pastel colors. I enjoy the symbols. There's some cards that really give you the opportunity to dive deeply into the meaning. I really have incredibly beautiful, not beautiful in the sense that positive, but really meaningful, let's put it this way, readings with this deck. You know, there's a lot that I feel like I can talk about whenever I pull this tarot. It is truly one of my favorites. It is definitely one of the decks that I use the most for personal readings, because when it comes to clients, I have to be careful, because as I said, there are a few cards that are a bit triggering. So I kind of, you know, if I know the person, then we can discuss using it. But it is really spectacular. Now this deck, I will put the link in the description box below, but just for you to know, it's actually not even an expensive, it's very, very reasonably priced deck. And it is also a reasonably priced shipping cost to Australia, not the usual 60 bucks that I have to spend. Now, the sister deck that I was telling you about is this one. This is the Welcome to Night Vale Tarot. And it is, it's got a different kind of vibe to it, different kind of artwork, you know, different kind of setup. Color palette. It's a completely different deck. You know, long story short, it's a completely different deck, but it is still based on the podcast. It's got a different color palette that I really like. I really appreciate the vibrancy of these colors. If you don't, the other deck, let's say you kind of need to listen to the podcast in order to always know the meanings behind the cards, or you can simply read them following the traditional RWS system. And I would say for this one, you probably do as well. I just really like it. It's a very recent acquisition, so I didn't really have the time to use it a lot, but I just by looking at it, I really like the artwork and the colors. And so this one is the Welcome to Night Vale Tarot, and it's the sister tarot from the Hayworth Tarot. The Tyldwick Tarot, this is quite famous as well in the tarot community. This is unfortunately the second edition. I have been looking for a first edition with a price tag that doesn't force me to sell my kidneys to buy it, and I haven't been able to find it. But I do really love this edition as well. And by the way, I was lucky enough to speak to a lady in the US that has done an extensive work of research on this deck, and she sent me the PDF of this research that she's done, and it's basically a very comprehensive guide on each and every card, which is exactly the same thing that I'm doing for the Yokai Yochi, by the way. And I only just filmed the major arcana, so I just have to edit the video, but I will post it within days. This deck is absolutely beautiful. It's very unique. I honestly don't think there's other decks like this, you know, or I might be wrong, of course, because I cannot possibly know everything. And I haven't seen all of the decks up there, right? I mean, nowadays there's so many decks being produced every day. There's hundreds of Kickstarters every year, and as you can imagine, it's impossible to keep track of everything. But to my knowledge, this is a fairly unique deck. As you can see, there's no human presence, or rather, there's no humans. There is human feel to it. It looks as if it's being taken in a mansion that has been, you know, temporarily abandoned by the inhabitants, and someone has just gone around and taken very static, very still photos of elements of this place, and they then came up with this association with the tarot cards, which is absolutely beautiful. It's a deck that, to be perfectly honest, I don't use a lot. Not because I can't read with it, because it actually reads really well. But because, well, it's also, even though it's a second edition, it was quite expensive as well. And I don't want to ruin it. And I know that this deck is probably never going to get a reprint because unfortunately the creator has passed. And the second edition was actually printed or, you know, organized by his brother. But it doesn't look like he's going to do another print. So I'm really grateful that I have this deck. So this is the Tyldwick Tarot. This is the Blood Moon Tarot by Sam Guai, and I've got fantastic news. This is going to be reprinted. So it was out of print for a while, and it was very sought after. This is the deluxe edition. There has been so much demand ever since that Sam has decided that she's going to go with a second print, which made me very, very happy, because even though I do have it, I will get a second copy because I am just a tarot nerd. If you haven't watched my Confessions of a Tarot Nerd video, I confess that I basically have more than one copy of some of my favorite tarot decks, simply because I'm terrified of ruining them, and you know, I need to have the kind of sense of security that tells me that it's okay, I still have a copy, you know, a safe copy. This deck is very dreamlike. Some cards remind me a lot of the Pan's Labyrinth by Guillermo del Toro. It's that kind of feel to me, that kind of, it feels like you're stepping into a world of dreams. Sometimes it's the world of nightmares. Sometimes, you know, it's the more kind suit of songs, for example, which is the suit of water. And it is a kind of, you can, vibration kind of vibe, and you can tell from the difference in the color palette, for example. I simply adore this deck. It is just absolutely gorgeous. One thing that I really hope, and you can't really tell on camera, but some of the cards are a bit dark. Especially the Fool card, for example. When I got the guidebook and I looked at the Fool card, I thought that, you know, it was a pity that I couldn't really see, even this card, I can't really see the details in the darker part of the card, so that you can actually see in the guidebook. It has been tweaked. I think the exposure has been tweaked for printing the guidebook. It is fantastic. It's I absolutely recommend it. It's not an easy deck to read. As a matter of fact, it might feel like it's a bit of a difficult deck to read. So it's probably for more experienced readers. But then again, you will never hear it from me. I mean, if you connect with the deck, even if you don't read it in the traditional way, I feel like when you connect to a deck, the deck will speak to you. So I am a strong believer in knowing all the systems and being able to read with the systems, but I'm also a firm believer in letting the deck speak to you. Now this is the Fool card, and that's what I was talking about. So let's say in real life, this is actually much darker than what you can see on camera now. And you can actually tell that there's a figure, there's a person here. You see the face here and two hands. And this person is literally looks like it's opening the door, just a crack for this character to just go through and enter into the world of adventure. This is a fantastic concept. I really love it. I just wish that it were a bit brighter, let's say. That's the only thing that I have to say. But as I said before, it is going to be reprinted. So this is the Blood Moon Tarot by Sam Guai.